I'd like to call this meeting to order. Kathy, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ann, if you call the roll, please.
Yes, Vice Mayor Saleh.
Here.
Mayor Lecklider.
Here.
Mr. Keenan. Mr. Reiner.
Here.
Ms. Genesee Zerker. Mr. Gerber. Mrs. Boring.
Here.
Thank you. And I'm looking at the sign-in sheet.
Oh,
I don't see anybody on it.
No one is signed in.
Okay.
There's two.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Moving on then to our consent agenda. Would ask if any council member wishes to remove any of the 7 items listed on tonight's consent agenda. If not, I would move that we approve the actions requested for the 7 items listed on the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ann, if you call for the vote.
Ms. Genesee Zerker.
Yes.
Mrs. Boring.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Saleh.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mayor Lecklider.
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to our second readings. Ordinance 48-12.
Adopting the 2013 to 2017 5-year capital improvements program.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, members of council. Enclosed in your packet for this week was a bound copy of the proposed 2013 through 2017 CIP. Additionally, we have enclosed a memo from staff which hopefully addressed any questions or comments that existed at the end of our presentation last week. From a monetary standpoint, just to let you know what happened, for 2012, we made some very minor adjustments for things that either weren't going to happen this year, so we moved the dollar amounts to next year, specifically the Brand Road multi-use path. We just shifted those dollars, and we made an adjustment for another property acquisition that's likely to happen this year. So just some more refinement in 2012. More notably, we made the adjustment for the improvements to the Dublin Arts Council building, which shifted dollars in 2013, 2014, and reduced dollars in 2015. And that adjustment was at council's request to expedite those improvements to that facility.
Was there anything else?
No, that is it.
Any questions?
I just had a clarifying comment. On the second page, the City Hall Council Chambers sound system, you know, the italics there where it says that we're not speaking close enough, and that's what the problem is. It seems to me that in other places that I am, that you don't have to be right on top of a microphone for it to come out clear. So I think that that's still a concern that the council has, is the level of equipment that we have that has all these special little things you have to do. And we're already, I mean, it's so far away. I mean, I'm short, so that's more of a problem. But I probably talk loud enough, I don't even need it. But at any rate, I think that's an issue. And the other thing is that, at least the way it was written, the reason I'm making these comments is suggesting, the way I read it was that we weren't going to do anything to improve the system in here. And like the other night when we had a meeting, and this happens every time we have a meeting, when we have the table set up in the middle of the room, and poor Ann has to keep jumping up and physically moving the individual microphones for us to be able to talk and be heard through her system. I think it's more for her than the people in the room, because the room is small enough. But there certainly are better systems that are available that don't require a staff member to have to keep getting up and moving the physical equipment in order for it to be taped and being heard. So, you know, I certainly hope we're not skimping on this, because we certainly have the money to have a reasonably decent technology for the amount of meetings. I mean, we have a lot of meetings, so it's not going to go unused.
And we'll follow up on the issue, and I'll have a conversation with Michelle and Peter with regard to what we need to look at from when we have our meetings that are down on the floor. to see what kind of systems or what changes we can make or what's out there, and we can bring that information back as part of the operating budget.
Thank you. And
Excuse me, Mary Lee, it just has occurred to me, I don't know if it's coincidental. It seems like the mics something's been done to the speakers.
they are louder tonight.
It's louder tonight. I don't know if somebody has come in and made an adjustment. I don't feel as though I'm speaking any closer to the microphone than I normally do, but maybe my ears are more sensitive this evening, but it sounds louder, doesn't it?
I agree with you.
Yeah, anyway, sorry, go ahead.
And then the other thing was on the AR 1301, the park renovation and improvements, with John had brought up about Glacier Ridge and wanting to institute more active park activity capability there. And I just wanted to comment that I know John felt strongly about that, but I know that I am opposed to that on the basis that it is a wonderful passive park with bird watching and other forms of animal watching that lots and lots of people go out there to do. And if we consider then making it this active, aggressive park, then we're, you know, the birds and other animals that it was designed for go away, and it doesn't serve the purpose that it was intended to originally.
And as a follow-up comment on that, I'm not suggesting that you could make that entire park a passive park or an active park, nor would I suggest that it be so, but I was just thinking that a small portion of it, it looks like it's about, if you see what they've done to some of their other parks, it's hardly an area more than 40 yards by 40 yards. And I just think that particular park is devoid of any real focus that their other parks have. And some of them are passive. I mean, there's bald eagles and other things to do, but this particular park is sort of a flat park. And just talking to John O'Mara about this, and you know, I don't know if, you know, he would disagree with this. You know, it's the kind of park that it just lacks a focal that could make it have some zing. So talking to our Parks and Rec leader here and just looking at different ideas, I think they may be willing to give us an amenity and partially pay for it or mostly pay for it. So it's something I'd like to see them look into. And down at the Whittier Peninsula, they built an absolutely extraordinary climbing system that's first class, and it sort of matches the desires of our young people. They are rock climbers, and it's really an architectural embellishment. It's actually absolutely beautiful. If you've seen it, it's a series of arches. It looks a little bit like sort of the picture of Cabo St. Luke, is where you see the arches over the water. They just did a fantastic job, and he said his team really worked hard on creating that particular amenity, the young people that he had, and it's really well worked out. And it stays open till like, midnight, I think, on Wednesday. You can still go down and climb it, and hugely well received by the young people. We're trying to attract up here for our businesses and who want to live and work in Dublin. And it's kind of amenity, I think, that draws those kind of people up here. So that's the only reason I suggested it. I certainly, Marilee, don't want to suggest that we make the park anything more than what it is, because it is a passive park, but just to have a central feature that makes it stand out. And if you look at the metro parks, almost all of them have some kind of quality that's really, really unique, and ours is, you know, a path through a forest and some fields and some trees, but it's lacking the kind of punch that maybe the Northwest up here really could use. So that's the reason I suggested that.
You know, I recall we spent about 20 minutes talking about this in the Finance Committee meeting, about 3 weeks ago? And what's the position of staff that every time one of us brings something up, it now gets included into the budget, or do we vote on it? What's the process here?
No, part of this information was to provide a recap as far as the requests that were made. And we're not saying that we're going to go back and make any proposals to the Metro Park, but I think it probably does give us an opportunity or a reason to go back and just have a conversation with them about the park. And it's not that we're promoting any one position, but it's more just having a conversation with them to see if there's any element that they may be interested in considering for the park, or something that we may have an interest in. I know at one point, we had talked to them about doing a sledding hill at the park there, and they didn't have an interest in doing that. So I think a lot of this is just that we'll have the conversation with them to just see what options, if any, there are, and then we can always bring that information back if there are any options that they would consider.
Yeah.
I appreciate that because I was
fair.
not here at the meeting, and I read that and also made me raise my eyebrow because I'm not sure if we have a stated objective to that park, like a mission statement or something for that park and what the intention is. And not that I disagree with John as far as these nice features, except there may be better places for it, such as the Kaufman Park that's supposed to be extremely active, and that maybe that is a place we want to look at these special features, because I agree with Mary Lee at this point. I appreciate your talking to the people involved. I think it needs to be really, when we have passive parks, we have all kinds of parks in Dublin that feature different features, you know, and attractions. So I'm not opposed to the climbing wall, just not at this place.
There's an awful lot of quiet activity. I mean, the bird population out there is increasing. Every year they're discovering that it's a great place for migratory birds, to watch migratory birds, and more are showing up. And I don't know. I love that park just like it is. And I think, you know, if we want to have it, I don't disagree with you, John. I think that would be a dynamite thing to have up this way. I'm not sure that's the right location. And so I think I'd rather let the Metro Park system be the ones to say, you know, what they're interested in for that park. And if we want something active like that, then we could go ahead and do that someplace within Dublin. We have lots of
Yeah.
parkland.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just want to say, I had a similar reaction, and I'm glad Mary Lee raised it up, and with all due respect to John, and I think Kathy makes a very good point, and Amy and everyone, you know, with respect to responding to John's idea, you know, the climbing wall as an example, you know, might be something interesting as an outdoor feature, maybe just not in this particular location. I agree, Whittier Peninsula, you know, I've been there, but it's in an urban location. And in fact, I know a lot of the young people that use that park, they work in my office, you know, and the idea of, you know, some lighted feature in Glacier Ridge. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what you were suggesting. But Prairie Oaks is of course, a newer park, but if you've been there, it very closely resembles Glacier Ridge. There's no active, you know, outstanding feature. It's water features, and it's even more undeveloped than Glacier Ridge is. It doesn't even have asphalt paths in a lot of places if you've been out there. And it's beautiful, and I think that's the attraction to people. So with the park system that we have, I understand what your intentions are, which I think we all agree are good. But as I recall the discussion that we had at the last meeting on this subject, I didn't think that there was majority support for, you know, suggesting to the metro parks, you know, that they actively seek, you know, a feature like this, or, you know, to promote something. So I just want to make sure that the message was clear.
My other concern, if I could, once you establish something like this, it seems to grow, and, you know, you have the activities, and it seems to grow that somebody wants something else and something else. So that's what, you know, the reason I asked, is there a definite idea of what this park's use should be and contain to on that, so that we don't have something growing into a park that we hadn't visualized?
And I'm sure as far as the Metro Park, they've got what they've outlined specifically for that park and options, and that's something that we can have our follow-up conversation with them. And I don't know if they have plans for anything else or anything different in that park. So I think having the conversation or just a follow-up with them is worthwhile.
Yeah, they appreciate the high amount of tax support they received from our area. And I think, you know, there's some, you know, the realization is, and I think what you say is true, you know, some of the parks are very interesting. They have water features or ferns or, you know, hill trails or hemlock forest. This park is pretty much a flat park, and it's, you know, it's fun to run through it, and it's fun to walk it, and there's plenty of birds, as you said, Amy. But, you know, if you take a small portion and try to do something, it's, and that they're willing to fund, with their monies instead of our taxpayer monies, I think there's merit to speaking with them, see what they've got. What kind of ideas. It's just one of the amenities that'll just make our corner of greater Columbus, whatever you want to call it, a little more interesting. And like you said, I was really impressed with the young people down there utilizing that park to the degree that they did. And it fits with the whole concept of a healthier Dublin and people out there actually exercising and engaged. So, got a lot of potential.
Anything else? Comments, questions? I appreciated the information regarding the Arlington barn. I think you were trying to make us sorry that we asked for it.
That was not the intention.
That was some hard reading, but thank you.
Yeah.
Whoo, boy, lots of beams and all kinds of things. Anyway,
The pictures are very helpful. I appreciate that. And in fact, in several of the attachments in this week's packet. Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you.
With that said, I think we're ready to vote. If you call for the vote, please.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber? Yes. Mrs. Boring? Yes. Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
I got this next. Great, thank you. Moving on to our first readings, ordinance 50-12.
Adopting and enacting a supplement to the Code of Ordinances for the City of Dublin, Ohio.
Thank you.
This is housekeeping. We do this once a year to codify our code to meet our local ordinances and things that have changed with the state, and we ask you to dispense with the public hearing because it becomes effective upon passage per our charter. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I would move then that we dispense with the public hearing.
Second?
And if you call for the vote,
Mr. Keenan? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker? Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring? Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
and the vote on the ordinance, please.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker? Mrs. Boring? And Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to ordinance 55-12.
Authorizing the city manager to execute necessary conveyance documentation to accept the dedication of a 0.032 acre more or less permanent storm sewer and drainage easement from David A. Larkin and Carrie J. Turner and declaring an emergency.
Introduction, please.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This ordinance and the one following relate to a storm sewer and drainage easement needed between two properties located on Glass and Court. Glass and Court, if you look at the screen, is along the west side of Eiderman Road, and we're talking Eiderman Road just south of Warner Temple, and it's just a very short cul-de-sac, and we're referring to the two properties on the south side of that cul-de-sac, the first being 6715, owned by Mr. Daniel Larkin and Miss Carrie Turner, and lot 6707 being owned by Wood Run Partners. This easement is necessary. It'll actually be 10 feet on the 6707 property and 7 feet on 6715 in order to provide drainage in the rear yard of those properties and install a storm sewer to get out to Glass and Court. There is a treat area to the rear of these lots, and we're working with the property owners to better drain this area. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions, but staff does recommend adoption of these two ordinances and also letters of appreciation to both the residents for donating these easements and working so well with staff to resolve this issue.
Any questions?
Out of curiosity, these are new homes, relatively speaking, right?
One's not even built on.
Pardon me?
One's not even built.
Exactly, it's a developer. Why was that not part of the development plan?
It originally was. All the storm sewers were in previously, but if you look around, these kind of were slow lots to develop, and as they developed, this presented itself. And we've had this happen before where we've tried to preserve wooded areas with existing trees, that you don't go in and change topography there, and when they do the final lot grading, there just isn't a good way of draining it either through the lot or to other areas. It's not a common occurrence, but it does happen on occasion.
Is this similar to what's going on up on Brand Road? The new neighborhood that's being built, and the adjacent property has the water problem in the back, and we're
Yeah.
trying to mitigate.
And honestly, in the last 5 years or so, we've probably been more proactive about putting in storm sewer, where we question whether we're going to need it or not, and we just go ahead and have the developer put it in. It's much easier to do that. So Wellington Reserve's a good example of, let's err on the side of more infrastructure than less. Because as we find, and this is a good example, these are difficult situations to remedy after the lots are sold and occupied.
So it wouldn't make sense to ask the developer, because the lots aren't sold yet?
Well, they're sold to builders, so
Okay.
Wood Run
Okay.
is a builder.
So
Wood-
the development is already approved, so to
Correct.
speak?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I hope that we can kind of track that in the future. I know I think, Amy, what you're talking about, we had a developer who's putting in adjacent development help out on that.
Right.
So I'm hoping that maybe we can take a closer look at this with new development.
Yeah, I think if you consider this is probably the first one you've seen in probably 10 years, that's probably a pretty good track record. So.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Other questions? Hearing none, I would move that we dispense with a public hearing and treat this as an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
And if you call for a vote?
Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
And then the vote in the ordinance, please.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
And Mr. Nancy
Yes.
Zerker?
Thank you. Ordinance 56-12.
Authorizing the city manager to execute necessary conveyance documentation to accept the dedication of a 0.022 acre more or less permanent storm sewer and drainage easement from Wood Run Partners LLC and declaring an emergency.
Reduce it.
Thank you.
Same report as previously. This is
Okay.
just the other property.
Perfect. That's
I thought you'd enjoy that.
Assuming no questions, I would move that we dispense with public hearing and treat this as an emergency.
Second.
Thank you. And if you call for a vote on the
Mr. Nancy
emergency?
Zerker?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
And Mrs. Waring?
Yes.
And on the vote, please? Oh, I'm sorry, on the ordinance, please.
Mr. Keenan? Yes. Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
And Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Moving on to the resolution portion of the agenda. The first resolution on tonight's agenda is Resolution 51-12.
Accepting the lowest and best bid for the Dublin Road South multi-use path, Tuttle Road to Hertford Lane, and authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for said project.
Thank you. Introduction, please.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Mr. Hammersmith.
Mayor and members of council, staff is pleased to bring before you this evening the first portion of the Dublin Road South bike path between Tuttle Road north to Hertford Lane. As you may recall, we've started on this project several years ago. The first public involvement meeting was in November of 2009, and after you adopted the final alignment last fall, we've been feverishly working on the detailed design. Many constraints to overcome, utilities, stone walls, ravines, ditches, driveways, trees, you name it. But as we've worked through that design, we felt that we could proceed on this first section, which is all located within right-of-way. It's a 1,500-foot section along the west side of Dublin Road. It involves 10 property owners, several driveways, several of which are shared driveways. And we've been meeting with those property owners to discuss, typically on their property, the removal of trees and also the regrading or repaving of their driveways and regrading of their yards adjacent to the path to best transition the path with their properties. Of those 10 property owners, to date, we have 7 right-of-entry agreements, either in hand or one in the mail. We have 3 remaining property owners to work with, 2 who have many questions and have yet not signed the right-of-entry agreements. We've tried as best we can to address their concerns, whether it be maintenance of the existing ditch, the progression of the path as it continues north, and the city's commitment to complete the remaining portion of that path, the replacement of trees, the effect on sprinkler systems, you name it. One thing I do want you to understand is that we can still construct this path within the existing right-of-way. It really is a matter of how we transition into those existing driveways, and what we've asked for with those right-of-entry agreements is permission to be on private property to work outside of the right-of-way in order to blend in both yards and driveways. And also, we've offered to replace the 2 trees that are being removed and plant new trees on their private property as a replacement of those existing trees. We opened bids for this project, as you can see, on August 30th. We had 3 bids. Our estimate was $180,000, which you can see we were the low bidder on this. But we believe that was the result of, after analyzing the bids, for a result of higher prices for asphalt, concrete pipe. There is some rock excavation in order to get the storm sewer in down here, and some other items. You may ask about the asphalt prices. A lot of it's because it's a handwork and pretty meticulous at the driveways. And as you look at the bids and how close the bids were of the 3 that were submitted, they're all within a couple of percentage points of each other. So obviously the contractors had the better number than staff on this particular project. We're proposing that tonight, after your acceptance of the bids, that we proceed towards construction, which will start later this month. And our expectation is for this project to be completed by the 1st of November. The other advantage to this project is it allows us to construct this portion of the path while Dublin Road is closed, as the culvert is currently being replaced, the Hurth-Wolpert culvert at this location. And as you know, we have Dublin Road closed between Tuttle Road and Hertford Lane. So logistically, it's really an ideal situation to get this portion of the path completed.
Do you think that played into the bid price?
I think that actually
Slightly
helped us
lower?
in the bid price.
Yeah, I would
in terms
think
of
that
maintenance
would.
of traffic and logistics as far as getting material placed and working around traffic. So I honestly think the number would have been higher had we not had the opportunity to do that. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions. We will continue to work with the remaining property owners on their right of entry agreements. But our intent is, unless you tell us otherwise, to proceed with this project and continue to move towards construction.
Paul, those are ash trees along there, aren't they?
Correct. I think there's one that is not. I think it's a maple tree that we are going to try and save. The path it's shown on the plans to be removed. We were actually going to leave it in place and see how it does after construction.
Is that okay with the property owner?
But the remaining trees they're ash trees, yes.
And then we got an email about the ditch and the idea that we should pipe that ditch and make that part of the stormwater system. How much would that add to the cost of the?
We've talked about that last week again. What we are going to do in engineering is look at developing a program number for the cost of improving that ditch. We've got roadside safety funds within the CIP that would be available to make this improvement. In our conversation, my desire is not to look at curb and gutter and change the character of the road, but if we can pipe the ditch and provide the road drainage in a better system that goes underground and allows the ditch to be better maintained or easier to maintain by the property owners, that would be our goal. So we are going to work at developing that estimate, but we don't have that currently.
And that's something, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
And that is something that can be done after this path is constructed without disturbing the path. It's just,
It would not disturb the path, but it might have an effect on driveways.
again.
And not the portion of the driveway between the path and the home, but the portion between the path and the roadway itself.
Gotcha. So we're not going to go back and redo work.
We might. It's impossible, but we'd be talking 5 driveways, so we're not talking a huge expense.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, would you clarify that for me, Paul? So what you're saying is, okay, so if we end up piping it and covering it over, does, I guess the engineering side of it, I'm wondering, on the driveways, okay, they're going to be different dimensional pipes, possibly per homeowner. Some guy might have
They currently
vitrified
are.
tile, some guy might have concrete, and the guy might have metal.
Correct.
So would we tear all that out also to make this work so the pipe is continuous, or is there a way to
Actually,
join your?
What our goal is to try and as best possible before this project gets too far along to take a look at that and put those pipes in presently and establish those grades. so we don't have to go back and remove the
Well,
driveways.
well, I'm wondering, is it possible to transition between, a metal pipe and concrete pipe and
We would put concrete pipe, most likely underneath the driveways.
for all of them? So you would
Correct.
end up sawing through their driveways.
Yeah, but we may do that, we're going to redo their aprons as part of this project, so now would be the time to put that pipe in.
Yeah.
As long as we can determine the proper grade to put it in and determine the proper size.
Okay.
So that's the best case scenario. Worst case is we come back and remove these aprons, in 2 years, if that's when the project happens, to improve the ditch and put in new pipe.
Okay. I was just curious to what extent you were thinking about replacing this.
Rick?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Amy asked the first part of my question. The other part was, how long do you think your study would go on? And
It wouldn't take us more than 30, 45 days. It's just a matter of trying to squeeze it in with everything we have going on construction-wise right now, but it's not a difficult
so theoretically,
estimate.
we could still do it while we're still there now.
I think that would be tough. We're pushing up against the end of the construction season currently. What we might consider doing, if we wanted to advance the project, is to put in temporary asphalt on their driveway approaches just over the winter. That's sacrificial, that we would come back and remove next year, just enough to get us through. So it may not be the permanent thickness of the asphalt, but enough to make it functional.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike?
We had one of the emails was from a Newcomb,
Yes.
and Sarah, I think you said you were going to answer them. Did that happen? And is that one of the properties affected here in the red line?
Yes, it is one of the properties Paul pointed out to you just south of the culvert
Okay.
replacement. I've been in contact with the Newcombs, met with Miss Newcomb around the middle of August. I've spoken with both her and her husband via telephone, and we're actually reaching out again to them this week. They have some concerns that typically are beyond the scope of this project, again, going back to the ditch, looking at tree replacement, some inquiries they've indicated in the past regarding speed on the roadway, that we're trying to assist them in looking at the issues immediately associated with this construction, separate from some more operational type issues or other concerns they have. But we're not to a point, I would say, that we're at resolution.
But the issue is communication, and we are communicating.
Yes, they are hearing from me pretty regularly.
That's good. Thank you.
Marilee?
Yes, well, I wanted to follow up, Sarah, with that, because the email we all received was very negative about our process, and certainly suggested that the neighbors here all affected by this are, although when we approved this, a lot of them were here, and I recall that many of them spoke up in favor of a bike path. It seemed, my recollection could be wrong, that there might have been one person at least that said they weren't in favor of it, but in general, people were requesting it because they wanted to walk down to historic Dublin and all. But this email that we received, that you also, of course, received a copy of, said that, that the city never engaged the neighborhood in any discussion until 2 weeks ago when they were given the final product. And said that, the city was there to answer their questions as opposed to engaging the public in the placement or design or something. So could you inform us as to what the process was that the staff used?
And
Sure.
I'm probably better to address that.
Sure.
Keep in mind, this is about 6,300 feet of path between Tuttle and Waterford. So there's been many, many conversations with all the property owners, but we really focused on those that had the heaviest impact: the removal of stone walls, the removal of mature trees, regrading of their property. And when we initially met with the open house and we reported back to council, what this portion of the neighborhood asked for was for the path to be moved further away from their homes. We originally had it west of the trees that are going to be removed, and we're going to need a permanent easement to put the path in. They asked to put it within existing right-of-way, to go ahead and remove the trees, and that's what we did. And there really wasn't any further discussion with the property owners because that was a pretty easy design at that point. And then as we decided that now would be a good time to construct this project, as the plans really got to closure pretty quickly this year, we felt that really was the best time to go out and then meet with them and say, here's what we need from you in order to construct this path, which are the easements. And typically, we don't have those discussions on easements till the very end of the project. When we finally know the design is fixed, the alignment's fixed, we're not going to change anything any further, and this is what property we need to acquire from you.
And did these people own this property at the time we began this discussion a couple years ago?
I can't say that specifically. I believe the Newcombs have been there since '09.
Yes.
I believe they have. But I will tell you, many properties have changed hands during the course of 3 years. And as that has happened, we've reached out to those property owners, those new property owners, and have said, hey, look, I don't know if you know about this, but this project's coming. We don't know that the property owner changes, or the property changes ownership until we see it on the auditor's website.
Right. And then a follow-up question on the back of the page, your summary. In the first paragraph, I just had a question when the last sentence, which you verbalized, would not be as smooth, et cetera. If you might address, how does that impact safety and question of liability to the city then, if we're not able to do it in the way we would normally do?
Yeah, and that's, I mean, in terms of liability, as far as yard grade, it's probably just not going to look as even as folks would like.
I mean liability for people who are walking or
The
bike
pa-
riding or
the
whatever.
path will
and
not
fall.
change. The path will not change a bit. The path grade will be just as always intended. So the driveways and yard grading has no effect on the path whatsoever. Its slope, its configuration remains the same. What is probably going to be more awkward would be the transition of the driveway itself, going from approximately a 20% slope to a 10% slope. So there's going to be a break in grade at that point, which is you're going to be able to feel. It's difficult to transition that smoothly.
And that's the problem that the right of entry solves.
Correct.
And so which houses are we talking about here who have right now said no?
Presently, go ahead, Sarah.
Sure, there's 3 property owners we're still working with. First, to the north would be the Newcombs.
Well, could you point it out on the
sure.
other map, because we only have this other map?
Oh, sure.
Well, yeah.
There's 3. There's, yes, they're the 2 lots
here, they-
immediately south of the culvert.
They own both lots, here and here.
And then a few more houses further south is the Fannin residence that we are working with. And then adjacent to them is the Ardolinos that we are also working with.
We believe the Ardolinos just, Mr. Ardolino's been out of town. He's due back next Monday. We did have a conversation today with Mrs. Ardolino, and it's just, they haven't yet signed it. I don't believe that they're necessarily in opposition, or they did not indicate that to us. It was just really a matter of availability based on work schedules.
Thank you.
Kathy, did you have anything? Okay, all right. Anyone else? If there's no other discussion, then, Ian, if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Gerber? Yes. Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes?
Mrs. Boring?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes,
Mr. Keenan? Yes. Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
thank you. Resolution 52-12.
Supporting an attributable funding application for the I-270 US 33 Interchange Improvements Phase 1 to the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission.
Introduction, please.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Mr. Hammersmith.
Mayor and members of council, as we continue to work on the I-270-33 interchange upgrade, and particularly the Phase 1 of the project, we are and have already submitted an application for attributable funding to the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. I'm sure you would like me to walk through all the details of this staff report, but I will not indulge you, and I'll allow you to read it and review all the numbers. We did just include all the numbers in here just as kind of a scorecard. We know it's somewhat of a complicated project to keep track of in terms of the phases and the cost of each phase. But I will tell you the entire cost of Phase 1 is estimated to be $60 to $81.2 million. And that first phase gets us the first flyover ramp, which is northbound 270 to westbound 33. Our ask of the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission is $7 million over 2 years for a total of $14 million. They have available for these sort of projects approximately $50 million. We are hopeful to rank relatively high. We have several competing projects, but we have put our best foot forward and continue to work with our partners out in the private sector to advance this project. We are hoping to know, as far as MORPS's decision, probably by the end of November, and then MORPS would approve the funding probably in February of next year. So we will keep you advised as to the status of this application, and we continue to work on this project. And I think Mr. Keenan during roundtable will have a report on the workshop that occurred last week where the preferred alternative for the interchange was selected. So I'll allow him to do that under his comments.
Paul, the Dublin's percentage,
Yes.
what is that in the first phase? What's Dublin's percentage contribution to the overall cost in the first phase?
Currently, it's a little over 20%. Presently, if you mean by the first phase,
Yes.
the $9 million, and our portion of that $9 million is $2.25 million.
Right. And well, you mentioned an $80 million figure.
Well, that's the
Construction.
total of Phase 1 with construction included.
I understand.
So the $9 million does not include construction. It's purely just the preliminary engineering, the design, the right-of-way acquisition that we'd be doing in the first kind of step of Phase 1. So,
And how much do we contribute to that $80 million number? Just add it up.
yeah, we'd have to go through and add up the,
It's between 14 and 15
as I was
million
going to say, it's
total,
probably almost
which
15.
is slightly more than what we currently have programmed in the CIP. And
Right.
part of that has to do with what they're looking at in this project now is doing the design for the entire project and the acquisition for the entire project, which is the design and the engineering studies that are needed are more than what we originally had anticipated because we were looking at only the Phase 1 piece.
I guess the question that I'm getting to is our contribution typical of what would occur? Is it considerably more? Is it a little less?
You know, it's noteworthy in the conversations I had at the meeting that it probably is a little bit more than typical, but it does separate us from the pack. And I had conversations with some of the ODOT people, Representative T-Berry, and others who said this is a really big part of our opportunity to get this at the leading edge of what's going on with respect to transportation projects. So it's a big deal.
Well, I understand that, and
Yeah.
I understand that it certainly benefits Dublin, but given how much traffic passes through there, and the destination or, origin isn't Dublin, I'm wondering, for example, as compared to what happened on the east side in New Albany, what, is our contribution, comparable?
I think historically, upfront, the design and right-of-way acquisition has, in a lot of cases was 100% federal funded. When it got down to the construction, the typical split was 80-20, but those times have changed because there's just less available in terms of the federal funds. So to position your project, you're better off contributing more on the front end, if at all possible, to advance the project, get into preliminary engineering, final design, right-of-way acquisition, to posture yourself for construction. And that's really what we've been able to do.
Yeah, and the one benefit that we have is our funds are programmed for all of our share of Phase 1, where in a lot of cases, they can, the entity can only do, the next year or two. They can't program out all the funds that are needed through construction, and that's one thing that really helps us, is that we have our money programmed and set aside for this project, so they know if the state and/or federal funds are available, the local share is there and ready to move forward.
I just want to thank you guys for driving this nail home because, this is paramount to our community and the competition that we all have. This thing doesn't get done somewhere in the near future, it's going to be hugely damaging to Dublin. So, and I appreciate what you said, Mike, about the involvement of politicians and also some of the upfront costs.
Who are we competing against at this time?
The projects that are currently listed, the top three, one is it's called the East-West project out at Rickenbacker. And then I think the other one is the,
7071, 315.
yeah, split, those improvements.
I was told by some of the ODOT people that our staffing and what our presentation was well ahead of what others had presented. And so.
I thought the Rickenbacker money had already been dedicated at the MORPC meetings. You know,
Yeah, I'm not sure if, a lot, they've received funding in the past, and so it's just the continuation of completing that project. And yeah, to Mike's point, we are very fortunate that we're able to put staff toward this project that a lot of other entities aren't, to have Paul and Jeannie Jeannie, the amount of time that she has spent on this project is amazing, and she has worked very closely with the consultant that ODOT has hired. So I think they appreciate the support that they get from us on these projects, and we're able to have a lot of other staff members that are involved in community relations to work to coordinate the breakfasts and things that the CEO and the event that we have out at the tournament, and all of those things really are important and do play into how you get your project known and get your project funded.
It's interesting. It's become really a dangerous intersection. Every night I come home in that intersection and people backed out on a high-speed freeway. It's ridiculous. And the other thing is, it's just another way of reducing the interest. If you're going to be caught in a traffic snafu, the interest in investing in our community is going to start declining pretty rapidly, because the other places have pretty good infrastructure ripping through their communities and good exits. So it's really important that this thing get accomplished.
Yeah, and our focus has been the jobs that the system has currently created and the private investment. And then the main aspect of this project we focus on are the potential for the additional jobs in the future. There's a lot of land in this area that's still available for development, and we're estimating at build out there's the potential for 32,000 additional jobs in our area, which includes going up 33, as well as the potential for over $1 billion in additional private investment. So it's a key economic development driver in this area.
Well, just to, note, Kathy and I met with Congressman Tiberi in his office in Washington, D.C. how many years ago regarding this project? And took our first brochure, I guess, to discuss this. I just, Mike wanted to confirm, with you and others that have been involved in the discussion, that the state appreciates the significance of this project and that it doesn't benefit just Dublin.
No, that's exactly right. It's the transportation mode. Mary Lee's really involved with the MORPC piece as well, and I know that's going to be an important piece of the puzzle as we move down the road. So, and in the most recent legislation, it had a lot to do in the transportation bill, is one of the reasons that some of these federal funds are loosening up. So, as I understand it, anyway. So it's really important, and it's hats off to all the staff for what they've done. Keeping us positioned and moving forward.
The quality of information that we were able to provide at that time, if you remember, Tim, was extremely professional. That was done by our staff in the public relations. It was extremely professional, extremely informative, and there was no doubt in anyone's mind what our goal was and for the entire
The landscape's
presentation.
changed so much, too, with respect to what they used to do. Back in the day, you'd earmark these things and do it, and I think to that end, this most recent transportation bill is really helping drive this thing, so we're getting there.
Great, thank you all. If there are no other comments, Ann, if you call for the vote, please.
Mayor Lechleiter?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Missy Zerker?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Resolution 53-12.
Appointing a Dublin representative to the Central Ohio Transit Authority Advisory Panel.
Ms. Saleh, I think this is you.
We met, most of us, I think, were together to interview folks for this position a few weeks ago. Council made a selection of Ms. Ann Bowman, and Ann, I had a question for you. I noticed that on the resolution It talked about, I got to find it here. It's one of the perils in an electronic packet. Okay, a 3-year term. And then in section 2, it says they'll serve until a successor is appointed or until death, resignation, or removal. Is that in all of our, it's always there? Okay.
Yes, it is, sorry.
All right, I read as far as the names evidently. Anyway, I would move that we appoint Ann Bowman to the 3-year term on the Central Ohio Transit Authority Advisory Panel.
And if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring? Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. and Mrs. Zerker?
Yes.
And Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Resolution 54-12.
Accepting the lowest and best bid for the Muirfield Drive Tunnel Improvements Project, authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for said project.
Introduction, please.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Mr. Hammersmith.
Mayor, members of council, the last bid acceptance of the evening. And just for your information, we have one left for this construction season, so I'll see you one more time on a bid acceptance. But before you this evening is the repair of the Muirfield Drive tunnels. We are talking about 2 tunnels, and if you refer to the screen, our first tunnel is beneath Muirfield Drive, just south of Whittingham Drive. And then the second is a tunnel beneath Muirfield Drive, just south of Tartan Drive. At each of these locations, there are 2 tunnels, and each of those 2 tunnels has a head wall on each end. The tunnels are 9-foot diameter, and they are pedestrian tunnels providing access to the championship course. And over the years, these tunnels were constructed in this late to mid-'70s. The retaining walls have deteriorated, although the tunnels themselves are actually in very good condition. They're concrete pipe. The full-height retaining walls have deteriorated. Stone keeps falling from the walls themselves, and they've been in need of repair. We've done some temporary repairs, as you might recall, and in fact, a little over a year ago, we actually removed the one wall at the tunnel just south of Whittingham on the east end and repaired that one because it was in such bad shape. We've been working and had plans developed this year to repair these 2 tunnels. Funds have been programmed within the CIP. And we put this project up to bid, and as you can see, we opened bids just over a month ago. We did receive 2 bids, and our estimate at the time was $670,000 for this work. The lowest of the 2 bids that we received was just under $865,000 by Truco Construction Company, a company we've worked with quite a bit in the past, and that places that bid at 29% over the estimate. So certainly that caused us concern, and we really wanted to better understand where the cost differences were between the engineer's estimate and the bid submitted by Truco. If you refer to the staff report, and particularly on the second page, I kind of run through some of the details, but we are replacing the existing walls somewhat in kind. They will be reinforced, they will be concrete gravity walls, which basically means they will be constructed on a slope as the existing walls are currently, and then once constructed, they will be have synthetic stone, much the way we've done on many of our bridges, kind of typical of our bridges, have synthetic stone placed on the outside. But just in concrete alone, when you look at the numbers, because these are rather tall walls, it's $320,000 just in concrete alone. That's not any of the veneer on the outside, it's nothing else but just the concrete for these 8 tunnel locations. And additionally, as part of the project, in anticipation or in advance of the bike lanes on Muirfield Drive, we're adding 16 feet of length to each end of the tunnels to provide that additional width on Muirfield Drive. So now would be the time to do that to accommodate the bike lanes. And also as part of the project, we are going to reuse the chamfered ends of the tunnels that currently exist. We did that successfully on our first repair, and we will do that again so that there is a cost savings there. If you look at the work that was done in February of 2011, that was actually done by Strausser Paving Company, another one of the contractors that we worked with quite frequently. Just the cost to do that work absent any wall. There is not a wall on that end because we were still trying to determine how best to construct the retaining walls. Just that work alone was $65,000. And if you use the bid estimate from Truco Construction just to construct a wall, that's an additional $57,000. And if you use those numbers as kind of typical to fix all 8 ends of these tunnels, That translates into a project of about $975,000. So as we really tore into the bid, and talked with Truco, we really felt that their number was true and accurate in terms of what it was going to take to repair these two tunnels. We've been anxious to get this work done, and we are particularly anxious now to get it done before the Memorial Tournament and the President's Cup next year. So now would be the time to perform this project. Should we consider putting the project, rejecting these bids and putting them back out to bid, we would raise our engineer's estimate based on what we've learned in the last month. And honestly, we don't think the result would be any different in terms of the bid that we would receive. We would still be in the vicinity of $800,000 to $900,000 to do this work. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions regarding this. Staff is recommending that we do accept Truco's bid. The last bit of information I would give you, we did consider alternative materials for the walls, none of which we thought would be acceptable to the community. A Versalock wall, which is basically a tumbled concrete block to construct the walls, or another product is called Ready Rock, which is actually large blocks, look like big building blocks to build the walls. But when we had that discussion with the contractor, we were looking at maybe $50,000 in savings over the total project, and we didn't feel that that was significant given the character that we were going to receive and given the prominence of this location. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Again, we are recommending acceptance of this bid.
Questions, comments?
Is there any language in the contract about completion prior to Memorial, or?
Yes, we had that discussion, and Truco is actually anxious to proceed with this project. It fits well with their schedule. They're concerned about the weather, and so we have said we want to get as much done this year, and if anything, leave final seeding and some finish-up work for the spring of next year, but we're not concerned about not getting it completed before the tournament.
Speaking of which, Marcia and Sandra, this is, to me, another example of the kind of information that should be shared with the tournament officials and the golf club officials. You know, this is another example of where we're going to the extra mile, you know, as opposed to using a different material and so forth. I mean, just one more example of the contribution that the city of Dublin is making that no other municipality is making. It's Dublin. So I would appreciate that recognition.
We'll make sure they understand.
Thank you. Are there no other comments? Ann, if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Mr. Edwards, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thanks for the opportunity tonight to present the new city website. I was out here a few months ago presenting, and I'm very excited about what we decided and come up with from the digital perspective. So when we first talked about designing for the web, if you look at this number, by 2014, mobile usage, people looking on mobile screens versus their desktop screens at websites, it's going to be surpassed by 2014, which means from a digital perspective, we need to design, you know, for a while we were designing for bigger and bigger monitors. Now our monitor size that we're designing for is like this. So we're designing for smaller monitors for better usage of our technology. So what is the mobile now? Mobile has become, our phones have become TVs, phones, and computers. And the first time in history, we've seen the convergence of these three technologies. No longer do you have to just sit at home and watch TV on a TV. You can do multiple things with your mobile device. And what are these mobile devices? Here's 4 examples of the most popular mobile devices we have right now. We have Google, Apple, BlackBerry, and Microsoft. If you would have looked at these by usage, this is for 2011. If you looked at this for usage in like 2009, 2008, BlackBerry would have been #1. But you can see that there's, you know, every company is bettering themselves. Microsoft, I know, is going to make a play pretty soon to try to get a piece of Apple and Google's perspective of that. So how do we stack up with that? In 2011, 25% of all of the visits to the City of Dublin website were from a mobile browser. And at this past Dublin Irish Festival, the Irish Festival website had an increase of 253% of mobile views, which is pretty outstanding and is also along with national trends. So everyone is eager to get a hold of that mobile piece. So you can't talk about mobile without talking about apps. So the discussion about apps versus mobile website. When we designed the new city website, it was in a responsive mode, and I will get to that in a second. So a responsive mode versus an app. An app is a great thing, and I use apps on a daily basis. Apps are a utility, and they're for a specific purpose. And at no point am I saying we're not going to develop a specific Dublin app. In fact, we have for the Irish Festival. We had a beverage app. But when it comes to building things, with Google and with Apple leading the way, we have to develop on 2 separate platforms. And then if you add mobile website on top of that, that's a 3rd platform. So that's extra dollars, that's extra resources being applied to develop for those 2 applications. So what we've done is looked at the focus back on the web. I mean, every year we have over 2 million page views of the City of Dublin website. And those are pretty solid numbers that I would stack up to any local municipality. So what we did, the digital team, is focus on a responsive web design. And what that means is that we have a single website. Now, when you pull it up on any device, whether it be a BlackBerry, whether it be Google, whether it's an iPod, iPhone, it's going to give you a reformatted version of itself. So you're going to get the same functionality that you would sitting at your desktop as you would as your handheld. So the beauty of it is, this is the website that we launched 2 weeks ago. You can see it on the desktop, you can see it on the iPad, and you can see it on the iPhone. So, and I've only shown Apple products here. It's not that I'm biased, it's just that these are easy examples to get a hold of. But you can also see on the Galaxy tablet, anything. And every day, Android, Apple, they're putting out new devices. And to try to stay ahead of the curve, the best way to do that is with a responsive website. And it's not just the digital team for the City of Dublin that is following this trend. YouTube is a great example. And if you would have told me this years ago, I would not have believed you. On the upcoming iPhone 6, there is no app for YouTube. They have put a lot of effort into their mobile website, which is going to deliver a higher quality of video. So it's not like we are, in this vacuum when it comes to developing this stuff. We are looking at national trends and seeing where things are going. So what we want to strive for from community relations is a seamless experience. So we're not building, our long-term strategy is built on content, not on devices. And it's easy to get caught up in the fact that, oh wow, Apple has a new product, we have to be on there. Well, let's take 2 steps back and look at the content. How are we best delivering that to our residents, to our businesses, to everyone that engages with the City of Dublin? And now we're engaging our audiences where they are. We don't have to wait, if they're on a bike path, wait for them to get back to their desktop to report an issue on a bike path. They can do it right from their mobile device. So what's great about this new responsive design is you can request chipper services, you can report bike path maintenance issues, you can reserve a Dublin facility. You can do it all from where you are and whatever device you have. We're really excited about where we can go with this. I know in the long run we're going to save money because we're not developing for individual buckets, if you will. And we're also going to be able to rapidly deploy information to our residents and to our business owners quicker. I'll use an example of when we had the storm, the windstorm that came in. We developed a mobile page that people could access information on where we were with the city. And that became, after talking to Jay Somerville over in police, that was their Bible for information. So by doing a responsive site, we're able to hit more people with more devices. So that's kind of a quick, brief presentation that I went through there. And I know if you have questions, feel free to ask them. But this is the approach that we're taking.
So that's how we access it?
Yes. The old URL for the City of Dublin website still works, which is dublin.oh.us. We've switched to this more branded URL, so it has more bang when you're out there, and it's easier to get a hold of.
So do we engage the services of consultants for this?
No, this was done
redesign?
internally. When I refer to the digital team, it's me and Kevin Cooper, who's in the audience here tonight. So we've done this all in-house. Another great thing is that it's built on another platform, which is called WordPress, and it's in the cloud. So we are able to...
The cloud again.
The cloud. Right. We're able to hit that without using any specific software. We used to have specialized software that we had to order through IT. Now we can use it through any web browser in the world. A great example of that was yesterday when we had a police incident. And our PIO, Meg Canavan, sent me an email to post. I was at a park in Clintonville. I was able from my iPhone to post that release to the news site. So that's the power of our new website.
Mike?
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mary Lee's testing it out. I think she's going to put in a request. She wants something picked up. Anyway, she'll let us know how it works out.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You got
We
it.
look forward to further developments and updates.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Very good. Anything else? Nothing from staff? Okay. All right. John, you want to lead off roundtable?
Nothing more, Mayor, than, again, just in case it wasn't noted, the award that the Finance Department had received, said the award is the highest form of recognition in government budgeting. Congratulations again to Angel and to the city manager and the staff. And it said it's the 9th consecutive time they've won this award, and got to be very proud. And I guess there's nobody taking issue with the contract that's before you for the Dublin Arts Council. I think we pretty much agreed to the format that was included in the meeting. So, and that's really it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mary Lee?
John, I was going to ask that question. What is the next step with this DAC agreement now?
Well, the DAC, they have their board meeting tomorrow evening
Oh.
for their review, and then we'll coordinate with them. And as long as there's nothing additional as far as terms to be tweaked, we'll have it back at your next council meeting.
Great.
Finally, yeah. I was very
We're
pleased
definitely
seeing
going to
the
have a
final
party
draft.
on that one.
It
yeah.
did turn out nice, and thanks to Sarah and the rest of the crew that worked on that over these
Right.
last 16 years.
I had a follow-up question on the Independence Day report. I was wondering, I maybe missed it, I didn't see, I couldn't tell from the way that the budget was presented, or that I couldn't pull out. What was the actual cost of Joe Walsh?
I don't believe it is detailed. That it's detailed in the memo. My recollection that it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 95,000. Michelle's going to give exact information.
His base cost, I believe, was 100,000, and I think the total came out to about 103 with some travel, that type of thing. I think we had 87,500 budgeted, and we trimmed a couple other areas in that budget to make that happen.
So while you're standing there, follow-up question then. In the memo, it indicated that there was consideration now of hiring a professional talent broker or booker who would, and so my question is, how will that impact the ultimate cost? And does it mean that we might move up multiple decades to the kind of entertainment that we would get?
Our thought is to hire someone, and we used to have an agent that would help us with it, and we'd like to do that again. Different types of fees that they charge. Sometimes it's a percentage of the cost of the act. Sometimes it's a just base rate. We are going to bring to council for the operating budget some different levels of cost for different types of bands this year, so council can have some input into what they would like to see that part of the budget be.
That'd be terrific.
So we'll bring you some good detail on that.
That'd be great.
Marilyn, if I could piggyback on that, I know we've discussed amongst ourselves from time to time about council having more input into that. And that was going to be in one of my comments as well, now that you've brought it up. But I think, and I can speak for myself, we'd like to be a little more involved in what's happened in the past. At least I would.
Sounds like the
Yeah, it sounds like
That's
you've
why
built that
we're-
into the process this year, so we
We have.
appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
That you listened to us.
Just another note on Joe Walsh, his actual fee was usually $120,000, so we were able to get somewhat of a break because it worked with his travel schedule.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to just let everybody know that, I'm not sure if everybody got this, but Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission does have the executive director profile now out, and they are advertising for the position. If people that are on the board currently wish to apply, they need to resign from the board to do that, and I know that that is taking place actually by some people at this point. So, do you have this? You might go on, I'm sure it's on the Morpsey website, that you could pull it and email it to everybody. That would be great. Also on August 29th, Marcia, Sarah, Dana, Angel, I think that's all of us, attended the US 33 Corridor Joint Economic Development District educational session. First, it was at the Marysville Water Reclamation Facility, and if you haven't been there, it's a very interesting facility to go to, and they actually have a fountain that is the water from the site coming through. And I think, from what I could gather in my little tour, that one reason they did that, besides it's an interesting feature, was to demonstrate to the people the quality of the water that they're getting from there. They brought in the city of Springfield to talk about JEDs and how that had worked for them. In their airport is where they did that. It was, sort of significantly different really than we might be interested in doing. Everybody was present that was part of the 33 corridor that we used to be very active in. And everyone indicated that they were interested in participating in some kind of a JED. So I think Eric really probably, I guess, is the ringleader, Eric Phillips, and he will be moving forward, slowly. I'm sure it will take a while, but with at least Jerome Township, Mill Creek, Marysville, and the county, and to whatever degree, depending on what they're doing and where it's located, whether or not we would be party to that. I don't know if you've had any follow-up conversation or not.
No, we've had some conversation about what kind of information do we need going forward, and a lot of the discussion is putting together what we would see as needs for the JED, what individual entities' objectives or goals would be for the JED. So that's the next step, is to start putting together some of those ideas and then get back together to discuss those.
They did an excellent job. Eric provided us, and I'll leave this with Ann for anybody that wants it, great information about the profile of Union County and how rapidly it is changing in all the various areas: education, income, taxes, and population, and all that, to demonstrate the need for these kind of opportunities to be made available to everybody involved. I thought it was a good meeting, and really everybody was there, and hopefully we'll be participating in a few more.
Mary Lee, before you and Marcia move ahead, could you just give a practical example of, how this would affect Dublin? How could it, I understand, some of these other jurisdictions that are farther out in Union County, but what could affect us?
Well, and that's part of what all the different jurisdictions that may be involved, you'd have to identify what each of your priorities are. For example, in the case of the Springfield example, they, as the city, wanted to help develop the airport, and it was not within their jurisdiction. So they entered into this JED agreement with the township that it was in, with the goal of creating jobs and improvements to the airport. So they had a pretty specific idea. Here, we would look at issues of infrastructure needs, whether it's water, sewer, roadways, technology, and then also looking at how do you fund those. And one advantage of the JED is you can use income tax base. For example, if the city of Dublin were involved in the JED, you could impose the 2% income tax upon the businesses that are located in the JED, and they would not have to be, or they would not be annexed to the city. So that's the benefit of a township having a city involved, is there's income tax money involved.
Township can't levy the.
Right, and so part of it then becomes a process of determining what are the other issues. If our interest is zoning, how would we go about determining what zoning would be in place? And then you look at how are the infrastructure projects funded, and a lot of the revenue that's generated within the TIF district, there's a formula that gets set up at the beginning as to how those dollars are distributed, and a portion of it are for those that have been identified by and approved by the JED board, which dollars would be invested in those projects. And then the ultimate goal is that there's some excess left over at the end that gets distributed to the entities that are included in the JED. So this meeting was more of an educational, informal meeting, just to kind of set some of the parameters of how a JED operates, and now the next step will probably get to be a little tougher in identifying what the goals and objectives for each of the entities would be.
So could Dublin participate in a JED other than with respect to property that is immediately adjacent to our boundaries?
Yes, and matter of fact, the Springfield one was just that. It was a jump over. And so they do not have to be contiguous. I didn't realize that until that meeting. But the state law allows you, so it could be Marysville and Dublin.
Okay.
Could enter into something.
Yeah, and there's no limit on the number of entities that can be involved. It just then becomes the more entities you have, the more distribution and issues that you're dealing with. But it's not limited to a township and a city. There can be multiple jurisdictions within a given JED.
So then theoretically, I'm thinking of the interchange at Post Road. Could there be, multiple governmental entities that could participate in that?
That's a possibility, and that's as we've talked about before, that's one of our areas of interest, and how potentially maybe some of the development would be able to fund that, and that we would then potentially have some influence how the area develops or how the money gets distributed.
And it can take some of the uses that we might not like off the table, because a township, for instance, might be interested in property values, whereas we're interested in creating high-paying jobs. And so it does provide some leverage to that end, I think.
I think it was, it's good just to get everybody in the room and start thinking as to how it can benefit all of us in the region. And when we start talking about the I-270 161 interchange improvement and how all of that ties in as we continue to move out in that area going up US 33.
Right. Well, thank you. Thanks for attending on our behalf.
Yeah, and thank you, Mayor. I really wanted to be there, but as you know, I couldn't, because I have a lot of friends up in that part of the world, so.
Did you have anything else, Mary? Thank you. Kathy?
It was good to hear about the Sunrise Senior Living
Yep.
Center. Has our staff had any direct contact with this organization to see if there's any direct plans?
Yes, actually, there was a meeting, I think it was last Friday, Thursday or Friday. Some of our staff, Dana, Jeff, Tyler, I'm not sure how many other folks were involved, but there was a meeting with the entity, and the discussions, they've expressed their intention is to develop this site into the facility that was planned. Now, there are ways from that yet, but we're working with them too on, we'll be preparing a letter to them to identify some of the areas that we would like to see them maybe clean up a little bit more with regard to landscaping, and then some of the internal walls and things that were put in the facility that you can see from the roadway. So it's my understanding it was a pretty productive meeting with the new owners, or the future new owners.
That's good news.
Curiosity, do they have to file new permits, or can they follow the original adopted development plan?
I believe the existing permit will have expired
That's what I
before
was
the
thinking.
transfer takes place, so they would have to go through the process again. And that's part of what, they were meeting to discuss some of those issues as to what the next steps are.
Okay, great. Thank you. Also, we received a memo about the next calendar year, and I noticed the input on there that she liked this adopted at 9:24, so please, I
I
hope
just
we all...
distributed another copy tonight, so you'll have that, because we sent it out in July. Right.
Okay. So I assume we'll talk about that next meeting?
If not, we know you'll remind us. We thank you.
We know you like that calendar.
Oh, I love this calendar. In
We
fact,
thank
I
you.
like the way it is pretty much now with the regular meetings, but yeah.
Did you have anything else?
You know, I would like to say something real personal right now, and I hope you all bear with me. Happy anniversary, Mike. It's our 34th. So.
There you have it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. I did attend the meeting on Wednesday, September 5th, participated in a meeting with representatives from ODOT, Federal Highway Administration, our consultants from CH2M Hill, BNN, and city staff. And we talked about the engineering design alternatives for the I-270-33 interchange. It was, as ODOT put it, an historic meeting. Apparently, this was kind of a new venue that had not been really utilized in the past. So it was quite a gathering. I must say there's probably 20, 25 people there, at least. And I really did not want to give up 6 hours in the middle of the day, but I was really glad after we attended the meeting, because it ran basically from 9 to 3. It was very productive. There was a lot of give and take from both ODOT and our consultants. There's a tremendous amount of devil in the details, of which when you sit through that and you learn about right down to the basics, where this pillar sits and why it can't sit there and it has to be here, the clearances, the roadway, the whole thing. And there's some really exciting potential alternative routes that may be configurations that I think are going to really be embraced by council. So you'll see some of those. They haven't really finally decided. They made a lot of progress, and I think we're very close, but it was an excellent meeting. I know staff, within a very short time period, put 300 emails and letters of support together for MORPC. You probably heard about that, I would imagine, Mary Lee, or they were all directed to the interim director, Bob Lawler, the day before our meeting. So, and we'll be looking to Mary Lee to carry our water there with MORPC. So, and Marcia. Well, they continue to hear from us, so it certainly hasn't been silent. There is a track hearing, Ohio Transportation Review Advisory Council, a public hearing on Thursday, September 27th. That's coming up. Project sponsors get about 10 minutes to present their projects for consideration. The track will not vote or take any formal action at those hearings, but it's a very important part of the process and moving forward. And then
When is that going to occur, Mike?
That's on the 27th of September, which happens to be my birthday, in case you wanted to know that on a personal note. Yeah, you're welcome.
Gifts and cards to Mike.
Yeah, gifts are good. There is community outreach. In addition to the letters that were sent to MORPC, staff's working on securing more emails and letters of support, and I'd encourage all of us to remind our residents and citizens to visit. There is a website, 27033, interchange.org, and view the material that's there, write an email or submit a letter. That all helps. And then there's an annual, has that been rescheduled, Sandra? Because it was originally October 3rd, and they've come up with a new date because of some conflicts. The date for the annual leadership briefing for the 270-33 interchange was determined just today. Staff will be sending council members an appointment for Wednesday, October 10th at 7:30 a.m. This leadership briefing will be held at IGS Energy on Emerald Parkway. Invitations will be sent to local and state elected officials, as well as CEOs, government affairs officers. I did talk to Congressman T-Berry, who was going to try and fit it into his schedule, and there's some other state officials that we hopefully will be on board. And one thing that was missing in that meeting on the 5th was I was a little remiss that we didn't have some representatives from Marysville, Union County, maybe even some of the townships. But the more we can keep all those people involved, the better. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Mike, is that meeting the 10th then replacing what was scheduled for the 3rd?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And that will be, I think that'll be an important meeting to be at. We seem to have a lot of buy-in. I think a lot of business leaders, community leaders are going to be there, and others that are involved. So
Is it still a breakfast?
Yes, as I understand it,
Yes.
yeah.
Mike, and did you say the location was IGS instead of OCLC?
That's what I've been told.
Yes.
So at
Okay.
IGS there on Emerald Parkway.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll see many of you as possible.
But we'll get a reminder email about that, get it on our calendar. Thank
Probably
you.
multiple.
I'm sure. Thank you. Rick?
Yeah, thank you. Just two things briefly. The Veterans Hall of Fame golf outing is set for this coming Monday, the 17th, over at Riviera Country Club. We are anticipating a good turnout, and this year we will have Supreme Court Justice speak, and also we have a 94-year-old veteran who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, so that'll be kind of special.
Who is playing golf from the court?
These are
No, from the court. You said a Supreme Court Justice.
Eve Stratton.
Eve Stratton, so she'll be out there. So, but golfers from all over Central Ohio and also some from other parts of the state. And you don't have to be a veteran to play, but we do have an awful lot of veterans who will be participating. So we're looking forward for a good event. We hope the weather cooperates, because this time of year you never know if it's going to rain or the sun's going to shine. Second, we had our second meeting of the recognition of Dublin Veterans KIA, and as you all know, our purpose is to come up with a what I call a long-term protocol or policy as it relates to how we ought to recognize those individuals. And we had a very productive meeting this past Thursday. Sarah and Fred have been absolutely fantastic. I want to thank them for all their investigation and the facts and things they have been able to provide to the committee so far. We've asked Fred to prepare first let me say this, you have a copy of draft minutes from that meeting. Rather than get into that this evening, we've asked Fred to prepare a letter outlining some of the things that were discussed in that, so that we can better maybe discuss this at the next council meeting on September 24th. Didn't think it would be quite fair to all of you who were not present and had the benefit of being there personally to go through some of the things we talked about and opine this evening. So more to come, and Fred, I know, thank you. He's aware of our schedule with this, and we'll have a letter here in our packets for the next meeting. And that's it. So.
Great.
Rick, if I could piggyback on that, I heard a story yesterday, I believe. Sandra's 92-year-old uncle had a hole-in-one in Pennsylvania. Speaking of your 94-year-old veteran, which is quite remarkable. That's just amazing.
Yeah, that is. See, golf's a game you can play at any age, right? Any age. There's always hope.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Amy?
Thank you. I wanted to remind council that we have a personnel board review appointment. I did speak with the individual that we talked about in our last executive session. If you want to talk about that in another executive session, but I'm thinking we could do that appointment next council meeting, and if you could get that on the agenda, and I'm happy to discuss that with anyone offline. I have been continuing to meet with our planning and zoning chairperson and staff at the pre-PCZ meeting, planning meetings, I should say. We discussed the last joint P&Z council meeting and sort of what we accomplished and what we started, and wanted to get another meeting on the calendar. And looking at the council calendar, it looks like the next available date might be October 18th, which is the Thursday. I noticed that it's also a BZA meeting, and I don't know, Steve Langworthy, how you feel about having, I don't know about staff responsibilities at BZA versus, would that work? Okay. Anyway, I'd like to throw that date out for the rest of council. We'll try to find a venue that's a little bit better acoustically, but if we could get that. I'm sorry?
What day was that?
October 18th, Thursday. It's between P&Z and Spooktacular, so I think that's
I won't be here.
okay.
And then the police academy, of course, every Thursday. Sorry.
We have a veterans meeting, but that's in the morning. So.
Yeah, I noticed the veterans meeting was in there. You'll start.
I know Thursday's a good day for us.
Right.
Can we try Tuesday, Tim? Are you available Tuesday? Are you available?
Tuesday, the 16th is fine with me. I was trying to make it on a Thursday, but
Yeah,
if,
I appreciate that.
does that,
Makes sense.
could that work for staff? We have that regular meeting coming up on Wednesday morning, so I can run that by the P&Z chair, and we'll try to massage that so that,
Maybe Angie can send an email out to us and let's look at our schedules.
good point, maybe you could, great idea, we do have that electronic communication. The third thing I wanted to bring to council's attention, the Abels on Avery golf site, it's a golf driving range down on Avery Road south of Dublin, is now, I don't know if it happened last week or it's happening this week, but that site is being rezoned by the city of Columbus to a big box retail shopping center. I didn't know if staff was aware of that, but yeah, if you go on the Columbus website, it's interesting, their staff report talks about the fact that because Dublin isn't building Tuttle Crossing and widening Avery Road in timely fashion, that they are needing to back off from their anticipated land use in their community plan that would have been office. But because of our lack of building infrastructure, they're going to build a shopping center. It was just, I know. I read the, yeah. In any case, that was the justification for their planning staff's justification for recommending approval of
What big
this.
box would want to be in the middle of nowhere?
I don't know.
Yeah,
And-
we have written letters, and I don't remember how long ago, but we've expressed some of the concerns that we had, and we've had discussions with them on issues of the infrastructure, and we do have staff that will be attending the meeting that is scheduled. I can't remember exactly, but Steve or somebody from planning will be attending.
Well, will we be actually testifying or speaking as opposed to just observing?
Yeah, we plan on, it's my understanding that we plan to put our issues that we put in the letter on the record, and those are outlined, and it's not what's being proposed is not in accordance with what was included in the Hayden Run corridor plan, so there's changes. That's our main concern, is there is a difference in the traffic that will be generated from that development. So we've identified those concerns in letters in the past. We've had conversations, and then we'll be there again whenever the meeting is held.
Could you email all of us a copy of the letter that you sent?
Okay.
Yeah, I'd
you.
appreciate that communication anyway. I just wanted to make council aware that that was
That'll be
what's
interesting.
happening.
With the railroad tracks, and you've got a two-lane country road with bar ditches on each side, that's going to really be interesting to see how they move the traffic around out there.
Yeah.
To the east of that, you have that apartment complex, and then there are a couple of churches to the south, so.
Yeah, it's very close to our new National Church Residences site.
Exactly.
And across from the Ponderosa.
Yeah, it is.
So it's
Yeah, it
going to
is.
spur development out there, so. Anyway, just wanted to get that on everyone's radar screen. Marcia, I'd appreciate if we could get copies of that. And that is all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, I'm real sorry to hear about that. Kind of put a damper on my evening, because I was going to ask, because I happened to be driving down there this past weekend, regarding, I was happy to see the progress at National Church Residences, and do we have a completion date on that?
I don't know that we've heard any updated dates. The only date we know is when they first started, they had to be finished by the end of this year. But I don't know what an updated timeframe is, but we can make contact with them and provide that in an update.
I know back in July, they had, no, actually back in late June, they were accepting applications, and they were interviewing people through the month of July and part of August. And in fact, I went to one of the meetings over at the Washington Township Fire Department there, and it sounded like they were hoping to move people in right around the first of the year.
Wow.
Yeah, the first phase.
It looks great.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd love to get a tour,
yeah.
Well,
we need more.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I went there, and I mean, that parking lot was absolutely filled. Every chair in that room was filled, and it's really, in fact, I called Mary Lee and I said, I found it very touching from a standpoint that there are this many people in this area that are looking for that type of housing.
Right.
It's just absolutely, the demand is huge, and there is no way, unfortunately, that everybody in that room will get an opportunity to live there.
Right. And it was commented to me by someone that are somewhat familiar with National Church Residences and their facilities, and that this is one of the larger ones, that they do.
But unfortunately, it's not putting a debt into the demand.
Right, right. But I'm hoping there'll be some contact between us or them and us, with respect to a grand opening.
Yeah, they had
I
told us-
assumed, we were
yeah.
there at the groundbreaking,
Yeah. I mean, they said that they would notify us, this was, even at the groundbreaking and after, that they would include us in the dedication.
Right. Yeah, it's quite a facility, from the road, anyway. Just one other observation, Fred was watching the football game last night, and admittedly, it was an aerial view of a skate park in Denver. There was a shot, it was coming back from coming back from a commercial, and it's probably online, but it was interesting. A limited perspective, given they zoomed in pretty well, but it was pretty interesting. So take a look.
Kettering has a very nice skate park as well.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.